Hi everybody, it's Bob Ost, and it's Friday. It's June 10th. No, it's June 3rd. What is it? It's June. Oh my God, I can't think what the date is. This gets me every time. June 6th. Okay, there we are. It's June 6th. Most of you who follow my show will probably be very familiar with that struggle to find out what the date is because I forget it every week. Um, but there's been a lot, I've been doing this a long time now. So we started this April 17th, 2020 because of COVID, because of shutdown. This is a TRU Community Gathering, and TRU, for those of you who don't know us, is Theater Resources Unlimited. We're a small arts organization in New York, and we basically try to teach artists as well as producers about the business of theater and to get people to think about in terms of the business and understand the business. And originally we were a producers organization, but we've expanded. We have lots of programs for writers and directors and actors, and we try to help everybody. And I think we do help a lot of people. So if you've been following us for 5 years, thank you. If you're new, this was originally a community service. We did it so that people would have a place to not go crazy during COVID. And now, all these years later, we're really back to, well, compared to shutdown, it's a normal world. Compared to the world that we used to know, it's anything but normal. But we're here. We're surviving. Our conversations are different now. We talk about all aspects of theater and all aspects of the arts. I have people more outside of theater. I have film. I have people that are involved in the music world. I've even had people in the dance world. Basically, we love art. We're here because we're a community of artists. We're a community of people that believe that art has power. Art is powerful, and um, we. I've been known to say that politics is where people go to fight, and art is where people go to listen to each other. So we're here to listen to each other, and we're going to be talking about something on the edge of political today. I mean, we're not always political, but there's a little bit political, a little bit of political content that we're probably going to have to touch on today. It's about arts and education. Um, it, this is if you're finding this, will we ever learn the lesson, the importance of arts and education? My personal experience and my personal feeling has been a feeling of frustration in the fact that politicians, whenever they talk eloquently about their various things that they're passionate about, almost never mention the arts. And I think that it's kind of endemic of a problem that we have. We in our country, I don't think we really appreciate the arts as much as we could. I guess there's no should, but as much as we could. We're going to talk about arts and education today. We're going to talk about um, the reason why arts matter so much in schools, uh, let alone in our culture and in our lives. And I have two ladies who are very well spoken on this topic, and one of them is Kimberly Olsen, who's the executive director of Arts in Education Roundtable. She's well, she's going to clarify her introduction to you. I often get little details wrong, so we'll have her come on in a second. Lucy Sexton, who is the executive director of New Yorkers for Culture and Arts. So I'm going to bring them on right now. And I'd like you to welcome Lucy Sexton and Kimberly Olsen. And I am going to take myself off for a second. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and the companies that you're both very passionate about and work with. Lucy, well, we can start with you. You have to unmute yourselves, both of you now. We're okay. We're okay with unmuted now. Whoever can unmute first can talk first. Kimberly, you win.
That's okay. I'm all set. Sorry that I'm coming to you from the out of doors here in Brooklyn. It has been a crazy month of June, and it's only 6 days in. So lots going on. My name is Lucy Sexton, she, her. I am a lifelong dancer and choreographer and performer, and have worked in various parts of arts and culture in New York City for my entire life. And it started, since we're talking about arts ed, it started for me with really good dance classes when I was in grammar school, when I was in high school, and that set me on my path. I now run a cultural advocacy coalition called New Yorkers for Culture and Arts. And that means that New Yorkers for Culture and Arts exists to strengthen the arts and culture ecosystem by sharing space with each other, sharing resources with each other, sharing information with each other. And also we do advocacy, which means that we talk to local government and state government, sometimes national, but it's mostly local, to ask that they improve public policy to better support arts and education, that they devote more funding to arts and education. And I have been heartened since you started talking, Bob, about how it's so infrequent that electeds or people running for office mention the arts. I have noticed an uptick, and maybe it's because I'm paying attention, but I also think it's because of sort of unified advocacy. I work closely with Kim Olsen, and the Arts and Education Roundtable has done an incredible job. But, you keep talking to the local electeds, the city council, the smaller local electeds, and eventually the information starts to bubble up. So I'm not entirely unhopeful. All right, I will pass the mic to you, Kimberly.
I'm just going to come in and say one thing.
Sure.
I had a conversation with Peter Avery, and
Yep.
he vehemently disagreed with me about this, but only because he comes from the point of view of New York. He says New York does respect the arts, and he's going to be coming on the show, I think it's in July, and he's going to be, I think it's July 11th, and he's going to talk about all the programs and all the amazing things that he's doing to the young people in the arts, give them a sense of purpose and finding themselves and identity through the arts. He does amazing work, and I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
my position is more national than local. I admit that New York
Yeah.
is arts friendly.
It is arts friendly, and I think Kimberly, we gave Peter Avery an award. My organization did 2 years ago, so we really respect and appreciate all the work that he's doing, really to make every public school kid be able to come to Broadway, be able to engage in theater, and do it on a stage that they feel, this is an option for me. So I think he's doing terrific work. What I will say is that it's always struck me as odd that when the kids are in grammar school, every PTA wants more arts and culture. They want dance classes, they want this, and they will often, as the public school that I sent my kids to, raise a lot of money so that we could have a dance teacher and they could have arts outings and etc. The problem is there's not that commitment to every school kid. There's not that. It is very much seen as something that, if a school is good and they have a wealthy PTA, they can have that. So I think the goal, and New York City is trying, but Kim is really pushing them to make sure that it is in every school for every kid. And it's not something that only wealthier school districts can have. So now I will, if it's okay with you, Bob, shall I pass the mic, or do you want to have another question?
Absolutely.
All good
Nope,
with me.
nope. I'm going to come
Okay.
on. I'm going to come on soon, but I want to hear Kimberly's talk about herself a little bit. Hi, Kim.
Wonderful. Hi, Bob, and hi, everybody. It's so great to be here tonight. Thank you so much for sharing space, talking about arts education. So my name is Kim Olsen. I use she, her pronouns. I am proud to be the executive director of the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. I'm also an educator, a artist myself, a community organizer, and a resident here in Long Island City, Queens, where I'm tuning in from today. And so the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable is the main convening body for arts educators here in New York City. We are an information hub and arts service organization, really working to improve and advance the state of arts ed across New York City schools, communities, and beyond. So we're not working directly with the young people. Instead, we are working with the workforce, helping to make sure they have the tools and resources and funding to be able to do their great work in and through the arts in every zip code, in every neighborhood, in every school across New York City. And as we've started to get to today, there is amazing arts education happening, but only for some of our city students. And really, that's where the roundtable comes in. We passionately advocate, mostly I'll say at the city and state level, to direct funding to supporting more equitable access to arts education, and also to change policy as well, so that this isn't something that on a whim can be cut from a school or a community, that we are really embedding arts and culture as a vehicle for student success. Here at the Roundtable, we have a saying that goes, "It starts with the arts." That's the name of our campaign, in which we advocate for universal access to arts education. And we truly live in that value that success in school and in life starts with the arts. So I'm excited to dig in and share a little bit more about what that work looks like tonight.
Well, I'm going to join you on screen now. So here I am. The the distinction I want to make sure that I'm clear about after having talked with Peter is that the work that's being done in New York is incredible. What you're doing, what Peter's doing, it's kept the arts very vibrant. I am only aware of New York City and and the uh, and the other boroughs. Is it also active and vibrant in the rest of the state? Do you know how New York State stands? We know what's going on in the rest of the country. We're going to talk about that too. So how is it in New York State in general? I know New York itself is known for the arts. We are an arts we're an arts city.
Oh yeah, I think I can speak about arts education. Maybe Lucy, have you talk more about cultural funding activities across the state. When it comes to arts education, what we're seeing is, again, there's great arts education happening, but it is not for all. And unfortunately, across New York State, there doesn't quite exist a unifying report or accountability measure to be able to understand where is there arts happening and where isn't there theater happening. And so what we see from what research does exist and from talking to counterparts across the state is that it tends to be the rural and urban parts of the state that oftentimes are the ones that are experiencing lower levels of arts and music education than maybe more suburban, more affluent areas of the state. And I will share this is something that we see nationwide as well, is that it has to oftentimes do with the number of students that it might attend a school, principals prioritizing of arts within the school community as well. Community, of course, call for these programs to exist in their school. And there isn't quite that accountability measure that if it isn't there, what happens? So there are arts learning standards, there are graduation requirements. Our Board of Regents, in fact, as they reimagine what the portrait of a New York State graduate looks like, arts is embedded within that. But we have to go one step further and think, okay, what happens if it's not there? How are we making sure that every student has that access? And then it's not just, ooh, maybe they get a little music class in elementary school and they might not have, say, a theater class until high school. So I think there have been great strides. We've been really excited to be a part of a lot of advocacy work to try to get baseline dollars to arts education, arts and culture. In fact, this year, our city has baselined $41 million to support arts education in particular, which is a huge win. Rather than us fighting for that money to be reinstated, we're starting there at ground level. So again, this is the basement though, not the ceiling. Lucy, I toss to you on your end in terms of what you see from your vantage point statewide.
Well, I mean, I think the advocacy that we need to do for arts education at the state level is substantial. Kim is doing it. Kim is leading it. The roundtable is. But you know, we are one of a handful of states that do not have arts and music as part of our core curriculum. We don't say that that is a priority. Many, many states do. The majority of states do. New York doesn't. That doesn't make any sense for New York. We've been trying to get it across the finish line. There's some resistance to, telling schools what to do. But it, as you say from the beginning, Bob, it points to the lack of understanding of that when you have, arts training in the schools with an embedded arts teacher that's there through all of the years the kids are there, they have better education outcomes. Kids are more engaged. Kids come to school for something. They learn all sorts of skills that transfer to other areas of their life and other subjects. So there's work to be done there. And where my advocacy comes in, because we're New Yorkers for Culture and Arts, and it tends to be more for state funding for cultural organizations. One of the things that Kim is pointing out is that, what about if they're not getting it in school? In New York City, a lot of arts education happens with cultural partners. So you'll have Alvin Ailey, who then partners with schools so that they provide some dance classes or some after-school programming, et cetera. I would like to see those kind of partnerships much more common statewide, so that you have every school has a cultural partner, so that there's another avenue to have access to music classes or dance classes or ceramics or whatever it is. So,
well, let me ask you something. Let's turn to something a little bit kind of, it's not basic, but it supports everything else. Why does art matter in schools? What is it about art? I mean, we hear lots of conversations about how important sports are, because you learn teamwork, you learn competitiveness, you learn, I don't know if you have to learn competitive. I think people are born competitive, but that's another story. But what is it about art that is meaningful for a kid, for a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old?
I can start by saying, I always say arts education has a marketing problem, because there is so much good that arts education can do in terms of the development and overall well-being of a young person. Arts education, when we look at what the data, the metric says, it's improved attendance in schools, it's parent engagement, it's improved mental health, it's improved, it's teaching students different social emotional learning skills. And Bob, exactly what you're saying with, as relates to sports, that aspect of collaboration, creative risk taking, understanding how to make eye contact. My background before I ran the roundtable, I used to be actually a theater teaching artist. I would do musical theater and theater predominantly in schools where students had multiple disabilities, known as within the District 75 setting here in New York City. And in those classrooms, I had students speak for the first time. I had students that maybe did not have the ability, that they were using wheelchair users. They were unable to move their arms or legs, yet were able to articulate and choreograph a whole group number. They were able to, maybe other students, stand with confidence in front of a group and share something that was important to them. And I think that is so foundational when I think of it like as an educator, having students be able to find their voice, know that what they have to say is important and it matters. It creates not only creative thinkers, but creative citizens and ideally creative leaders as well. And so that's why I advocate so fiercely for this, because of the way that it helps inform the whole person.
Well,
Lucy,
Lucy, I'm going to turn to you about this, but I want to talk to it from a different perspective. You are an artist. You're a dancer. When did you discover dance, and how has that influenced your decision that you want to share the arts with other kids?
It's really interesting because, I always say that arts and sports, they're the two things that gives a kid an identity, something to show off, something that says, I'm good at this. And that's what dance did for me. I was 11 years old. I was in middle school. I thought, this is what I want to do. I went to a high school. At first, I got into, I don't know if you're a New Yorker, but I got into Stuyvesant, which is math and science, because I'm good at math and science. I left it because I was miserable there. I went to a school in Coney Island, a public high school in Coney Island that had a great dance teacher. And she encouraged us to choreograph our own work. And we had dance performances. We had dance performances in the middle of the day. We had dance performances later in the day, later in the evening when our parents could come. So yeah, it gave me a whole world that said, oh, this is me. This is what I'm good at. And I just want to say, we have a lot of newly arrived kids in our schools now, right? New migrants who may not speak the language. What they do speak is music. What they do speak is dance. And they can then share their culture and that they're really good at drumming or they're really good at dancing or they know this from, where they come from. And it immediately provides a way in, a way to be part of the community and a way for them to be known. They're not just that kid who sits in the corner because he doesn't speak English so well. So I think there's all different kinds of ways that it provides kids an access into becoming themselves, even if they don't wind up being a dancer or a musician or whatever else. It is part of being a whole person and being seen as a whole person. So
I was very lucky as a kid. When I was 4 years old, for some reason, I don't know how to explain it, I started writing rhymed couplets. And everybody was like, wow, how did he figure out how to do this? I don't know. But I mean, I do know that I was born into the arts. I knew that from a very early age, I knew that it was what I wanted. Um, Programs in my school were limited. We had music. I got to play the violin, um, but I don't think we had. I'm talking a long time ago. I don't think we had the quality of programming that I think is available today in schools, or the variety of programming that's available. Do you agree or disagree? I mean, have we made progress? And I know there's more to go.
I think from my perspective, one of the things I love the most about arts education is how it continues to surprise me in what it looks like and how it shows up. So I know from my own work, I was using theater for conflict resolution work, which I didn't necessarily see when I was growing up. And so people are continuing to innovate in this space in terms of multidisciplinary programming that integrates the arts with technology, that helps support career pathways work in ways that maybe didn't exist. But I'll say on the flip side of that, something that we're starting to see and hear a lot from community members is the ways in which pathways for arts learning don't necessarily exist in the way that they once did. And what I mean by that is you might have been exposed to an instrument, say in elementary school, and have been able to do that instrument in middle school and high school, and that there was maybe a band or an orchestra. And that doesn't necessarily exist in the way that it once did. Of course, there are certain high schools or certain programs that are maybe magnet schools for that, or that are really cultivating that program as core to what they do, but it doesn't exist quite in that way anymore. And what we're finding then is as students maybe are preparing to enter into those high schools that have the orchestral program, have the band program, they're not prepared with the skills to be able to audition in the same way as somebody maybe that has access to private lessons or out of school support. So I'll say, I feel like it's that balance where, yes, there's continued to be innovation, expansive programming, especially as it's that partnership between not only the certified or licensed arts teacher in school, but also the cultural partner. But on the flip side, it's that consistency across age levels that we're not necessarily seeing that once existed.
And do you see any possibility of that getting better through your advocacy? Are people open to it, or are people thinking about it now
Yeah,
in ways that they hadn't thought about it until
I
you
think I
brought
think
it to their attention?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is in part driven, say, by New York City's CREATE plan, which is the like cultural strategic plan for the state of New York for New York City. Also through programs that are really targeting this type of work. I know the New York State Council on the Arts has been investing funding in supporting pathways, say, into orchestral programs as a means of diversifying the field. I think there are starting to be baby steps towards it. And also what we're seeing happening right now within New York City public schools is a real targeted effort to better equip and educate the principal on the values of these programs. Because what we're finding is so often these school leaders, they may be well-intentioned, but might not necessarily know what it means to have a theater program in your school, that it means a lot more than here's the stage. As all of you know, there's so much more that can go into that. And so it's making sure that they feel educated and empowered to provide the space, not only in terms of physical space, but time-wise, the resourcing, the staffing to be able to have these programs. And I think that's the learning curve that we're currently on, especially as advocates work with the leaders in the New York City Department of Education, within city council, state leaders to try to direct funding to it. It's one thing to get the funds there, then we have to make sure they're spent equitably to support programs across schools.
Jane Dubin wanted to know, what does it mean to be an institutional member of your organization? Is there a cost and what are the benefits?
Oh, yeah. So the Roundtable is a member organization. Although our programs are largely free and open to everybody, we do host a few member-only events each year that are typically with um, elected officials, with folks of note within the arts education space. Membership also gets access to some of our paid events, such as our annual face-to-face conference, which is the largest arts ed conference in New York State, bringing together anywhere from 500 to 700 people each April for 2 weeks of learning in and through the arts. And then in addition to, there's just some other benefits around access to services from the Roundtable, helping us being able to help you navigate this wild world that is arts ed, whether it be in the city or beyond.
Lucy, I'm just curious from your point of view, what are your long-term goals and what do you see achievable in the short term? Or is this a constant uphill battle?
I think advocacy is a constant. We always have new electeds, and we always are having to educate new electeds. So I think it's a, it's a practice. It has to be ongoing. But I was thinking when you were talking, Kim, that it really feels like we are still recovering from, No Child Left Behind and this concentration on testing scores. Mayor Bloomberg here in New York City, made it optional so that yes, every principal gets some funding for arts, but they don't have to spend it on the arts. So that when push comes to shove, they're in a low wealth school. They're like, I'm going to make sure they're getting reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I feel like in terms of advocacy, the devil's in the details, right? So if we want a change in schools and when kids having access to, as Kim was saying, consistent. I do music in this class, and then I grow up, and then I do that, and then I'm in the band, and you. Throughout their whole career, we have to be changing some of those requirements of like that if you get money for the arts, it has to be spent on the arts. And then, in terms of that the New York State legislation that I was talking about, we have to have arts and music as part of the core curriculum. I think these are things that can really shift things. Some things happened like, little things Mayor Bloomberg did that I wasn't aware of that really did a lot of damage. So it's these kind of things, just paying attention to the details and supporting groups like the Roundtable.
So back to Peter Avery. Do you agree with him that New York is well located in terms of the arts compared to the rest of the country? Or are there countries, are there states that you envy? Are there things that other states are doing that you wish we were doing?
Oh, yeah. While I think, again, there's a lot of good happening, there is always work to be done. And when I look at other models that I aspire New York to eventually grow to, I think of places like California, who not 2 years ago passed something called Prop 28, which essentially gives a dedicated stream of funding to supporting arts education across the state, which is what Lucy's talking about as well, is that we have that dedicated funding that must be spent on arts education. And that has been huge in terms of helping schools hire arts teachers. In fact, one of the main issues now is making sure that the workforce is there for people to fill these great jobs that are now being made available across California. And also with that funding, Schools are able to hire cultural partners, which are able to either come into schools with practicing artists to share their craft in an educational setting, or for them to come visit their cultural organization, come to the theater, come to see a philharmonic orchestra, come to the museum, which is huge. We know in New York City, sometimes a student's first experience leaving their borough is on that field trip. And so that's one of those models that I look at. I also think of our neighbors over in New Jersey, who were the first ones within our country to get to 100% access to arts education. So every school having some level of arts education, that's huge.
I do know that.
Yep. Yeah, that happened pre-pandemic. I want to say that was around 2017 or so. And I'll say the bills that Lucy's talking about, which we're very much advocating about, for S 6318 in the state Senate, Assembly Bill 6490 here in New York, those would essentially codify arts and music as part of a well-rounded education, which sounds fundamental. In fact, a majority of our neighboring states, so I think of all the folks who are in the northeast corner of the US, I believe 7 or 8 out of 10 have already done it. And we're behind, quite frankly, in an area that we really used to lead. I am so in awe, I will say, of the work of Peter Avery, that especially when it comes to theater, the work that he has done in partnership with organizations like the Arthur Miller Foundation. They have, I believe, doubled the number of theater teachers that are in our schools. However, theater teachers are still the most underrepresented across all the art forms. I believe it's something like there's 226 arts teachers in New York City public schools compared to 1,279. And this is per the annual Arts and Schools report. So again, good work happening, but we have to make it more equitable. And that simply those 226 theater teachers, full-time theater teachers, simply can't reach all 1 million students within our school system here in the city.
We're in a period that's very troubling for so many of us, where we have a government that is now doing things that we thought impossible to do in all the years that our country has been around. They've cut off funding for NEA, and 2 weeks ago or last week, or I think it was maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I had 3 companies that had lost their funding, and I had somebody from Americans for the Arts, and we talked about that and the impact of what's going on there. They've cut funding for PBS and NPR, and in general, do you think this is going to trickle down? Not trickle down. It's going to flood down to the education and arts and education area. Have you been affected by this yet, and do you expect to be? It's a whole framework. It's a whole way of thinking about things and looking at the world that is different than what we're used to, and it's uncomfortable for many of us.
I'm going to jump in, and then I'll toss to you, Kim. Just who can much more speak to how education's being affected, education period, and then arts education on top of that. But in terms of the cultural organizations in New York City, between the NEA, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute for Museum and Library Services, which are 3 of the federal agencies which have been gutted, in 2024, they gave New York City alone, cultural organizations, $32 million in funding. So the level of that is going away is going to be, it is drastic. We're already getting the notices if your funding's been cut, et cetera. But I want to just I went through the culture wars in the 90s and with Jesse Helms, et cetera. And, I think of the arts community, and my own first response was like, what are they upset about? They upset about because, Tim Miller is doing a show about breaking up with his boyfriend to 100 people in the East Village. What are they scared of? And I am coming at this time of it exactly the opposite. They know what they're doing. They are scared of arts and culture because they know that it has the power to change people's lives. They can see the different ways of being. Maybe it's okay to be gay or want to wear different clothing, or maybe there is you have access to your entire cultural heritage because your parents came from Haiti and all of a sudden you have access to this world. So that is what they are doing. They are shutting down places where people gather, where people share ideas, because that's dangerous to an authoritarian government. So that's my own little TED talk on that. But I'm going to toss back to Kim just to talk about arts education and education in this current administration.
Well, one thing that we all know is sort of troubling is banning books and banning what can and cannot be talked about in a class. If it makes if it makes somebody uncomfortable, don't talk about slavery. It didn't happen. If it makes somebody uncomfortable, don't let a trans woman or a trans man identify with the sex that they identify with. They're just so fragile. It's white fragility, I think they call it. So, Kimberly, just jump in.
Sure. So when it comes to arts education as it relates to all of what's going on federally, so of course, it has been just devastating to hear as these grant terminations are rolling out, typically very late at night. We'll hear about it the next morning. We'll have members of ours reach out saying, what do I do? We had the funding cut. And of course, there's an appeals process, but who knows what shall happen with that? We're hearing some folks have been successful in appealing.
Really?
Yep. Some folks have in fact been successful. Some folks are still playing the waiting game. Some folks are choosing not to. We also have at least one of our members, the National Queer Theater, that's currently involved in a lawsuit in partnership with the ACLU to fight back against these cuts at the NEA in particular. So of course, there's arts education that's being supported by that cultural funding dollars. But on the U.S. Department of Education side, there are a couple things that I'm looking out for. The cuts haven't quite happened yet, but I do anticipate there being something. So I will say the first of which, so there is a program, an Assistance for Arts Education program that is administered through the U.S. Department of Education. Currently in the proposed federal budget, that program is entirely cut. However, that program isn't very big. I talk about we got $41 million baseline for arts education. That program might be $5 to $10 million tops. Again, millions of dollars. This is still a lot, but in the scheme of things, not the hugest cut. Where I'm really most concerned is what will happen with Title I funding, which is funding that goes to support students in low-income communities. I'm concerned about Title III funding, which is funding that goes to support English language learners and students who are immigrants. I'm concerned about the funding, I believe it's Title II, that supports teacher professional development. Of course, concerned about Pell Grants and then how that provides students access to higher education. And I will say that the Title I funds supporting students who are in low-income communities, that's a lot of New York City. And what we're starting to hear from school leaders is although that cut isn't necessarily to arts education in particular, we know that when the going gets tough, arts education is typically first on the chopping block, unfortunately. We saw it during the pandemic. We saw it with the fiscal crisis in 2008. We saw it in the 70s when New York City hit a fiscal cliff and they gutted all of the arts teachers in our schools. And so I don't know that we're quite going to hit what happened in the 1970s, but that is the real concern. And we're starting to see there was an article about it on Chalkbeat as there had been sort of rumblings at the federal level. So I think it's as we are seeing those types of cuts, school leaders are going to be put in real difficult situations. And unless there are protections in place, unless there's dedicated funding for arts education, I fear that is one of the first things to go as we continue really, I think, as a culture to see it not as a nice to have, but as a must have. And as essential to whether it be every student's academic career, but also just who we are as a people as well.
Are we going to convince these people who are clearly intimidated by the arts that arts do really, really matter. I mean, we have people in charge now, people who can who have opinions and can make decisions, who clearly see it differently than we do. I mean, it's as fair as I can be. They see it differently than we do. What do we do about that? Is there anything that we can do? Do we just wait for the pendulum to swing the other way?
One thing that I would say to that is that we need to make sure not that the people, that our allies understand what is happening to arts and culture, right? Because as I said, if you are right wing, if you believe in the type of what I say is authoritarian government that is being advanced, then you are right to target arts and culture. It is what you do. So I'm not interested in defending that, but I am interested in making sure that our local electeds in New York City and New York State, who are worried, very rightly so, about Medicaid and larger things, SNAP benefits, et cetera, to say, we are also part of that. We are under attack. Arts and culture are under attack, and we are a very small investment relatively that can do a lot to keep kids in schools, to keep them engaged, to keep communities connected to each other. Having arts and culture in communities, particularly in low wealth communities, has many, many benefits, from mental health to community strength to kids doing better in school because they have it in their neighborhood. So that's, I think, the job that we can do is talk to our friends in government. The Democrat that you elected, make sure that they realize the importance of not only fighting back against these other cuts, but also in terms of keeping arts and culture whole in New York.
I can't help but think that there must be people on the right who understand this and do not want to attack the arts. How do we help them? Do we need to have more open lines of communication with the other side of the aisle?
You make a really good point, which is that arts can be quite a bipartisan effort. In old school Republican, it was often absolutely part of what they liked about their community. One thing that Kim said earlier is rural communities. Arts and culture are very important to rural communities, and the representatives, even the right-wing representatives from those communities, feel very defensive of no, I want the local music group to get funded. I want that culture to happen. So I do think there is room for convincing and making it clear to even Republican electeds the effect it has on their community, on their constituents, and that it is not something that just happens at the Metropolitan Museum or even on Broadway. It is something that happens in your neighborhood, that in your kids' schools, and that makes a big difference. So I think that's one area we could do better at.
Yeah. Any specific suggestions for people in our community, people in the room? They're not on, as you can see, we don't get all, about 50% of our community is New York based. We have people from all over. Normally, you would have people from UK and Australia here too, but I guess this was not a topic that they jumped at. What can we do? Are there specific areas that we could be helpful?
Oh, yeah. So just also touching upon what was just shared in terms of, we do find there is bipartisan support around arts education. In fact, so there's two things I'll uplift at the federal level. There is an Arts Education for All Act that has been introduced by Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, which has gotten both Democratic and Republican endorsements. And we also see I'll paste this in the chat and can share more about it. The Roundtable here in New York City has done a mayoral candidate survey as well to try to get a sense from our current candidates for mayor what their feeling on arts education is. We didn't get everybody, but we got quite a few of them. And we got from multiple political parties as well, all of whom showing staunch support for arts education in our schools. When I think about what can I do? Truly one of the most powerful things you can do is simply writing an email, picking up the phone, calling your elected official, and just saying, this matters to me. That at the end of the day, sometimes, especially, there's been a lot of what I call one-click forms online which feels like you might just be sending something into the abyss, especially now as people are advocating across so many important and really like life-threatening issues. Those quick emails where you can put in your name, your address, send a quick message off to your elected official, that actually has a huge impact. It is that ripple effect that truly is these officials are taking in so much information. They're essentially tallying to see how much they hear about from their constituents on a certain topic. And so the Roundtable has a series of different one-click forms and also work with partners, which I'm happy to share about, which essentially you're able to send a quick email to your elected, but also just looking up what their email is, what their phone number is. A quick call can make all the difference, because more often than not, I find that folks are supportive of this issue. And really, it's the storytelling of it as well, of why it's important to you and how it's making a difference for you in your community.
I want to just say to the room that we do want your comments and your questions. We'd like to have you engaged in the conversation. Okay, so Judith. Judith, did you want to come on as speaker? Okay.
Sure. I just wanted to ask, not just, I know you said having arts education will lead to better outcomes, but specifically speaking to Republican far right or not far right conservatives, speaking to them in terms of saving money in the future, kids in art who are involved in the arts are less likely to be on SNAP and Medicaid and all those things. And that's one way to talk to them about it, because I think that's where their lives are and money.
If they'll talk to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's well, I'm not quite sure in terms of like direct correlation with the Medicaid and SNAP. I know that there's certainly the argument to be made around arts as an economic engine. And Lucy said it earlier. I believe like the stat around that is in New York City in particular, for every $1 invested in arts and culture, it goes on to generate an additional $8. So if we're thinking about what's a great bet to put your money on in terms of making more money, that is one solid one as well. It also, when we think about just the outcomes of how it impacts the student, that there's the public safety argument. Students that are engaged in these programs have a higher attendance. They're more likely to be in school. There is research that shows that there is connection between participation in arts education and recidivism rates as well. And so there is an interconnectedness there as well, which I think might appeal to some folks that are across the aisle.
The only stumbling block we have is that a lot of the people have an entirely alternate reality. So I think they are as wary of us as we are of them in terms of the facts that we present. I think I've come to learn, but I'm very old now, but I finally learned that there is no reality. Reality is basically an individual's perception of what is happening.
But I think Judith makes a really good point. I'll go to the next question. Sorry, but because I really appreciate it, because I think that, you know, I work with a community also in West Philadelphia, and
that's where I'm from.
And we met both with Fetterman's office and also Senator Mike McCormick's office, who is a Republican senator from a purple state. And Fetterman's office said, just talk to him about the economics. And that's what they want to hear. And I think, and there's a great economic case to be made for arts and culture. You know, it drives visitors. It gets people out into the street going. So if they come to the theater, they go to the local business next door. They go out to eat. It is a proven driver of both local traffic to small businesses and also on a macro scale to getting visitors and to driving the what do you call it? Creative economy generates, 13% of economic activity in New York City. And I was going to say earlier when you said about do you crave other states, New York City has one of, our arts and culture budget is bigger than the NEA, right? And you see it pays off for New York. right? They invest in arts and culture. We have a robust arts and culture, and it generates income. It generates economic activity. It generates jobs. There are more than 300,000 jobs in New York are in the creative economy. So there's lots of cases to be made on the economic front for arts and culture as jobs and as keeping your tax base and driving the local economy. So thank you for raising that. And I think, Donald, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I think Kimberly earlier said that there was a large disparity between the number of theater teachers and students. And I was just wondering, do you ever like capture some of the shows or the classes that the teachers are teaching and beam it out to some of the schools that might not have a theater department or might not have a teacher? You guys ever do anything like that?
Sounds
Oh,
like a good idea.
yeah, there is. That's why we at the Roundtable, we say it is that partnership between certified arts teachers and arts and cultural partners, because not every school maybe can afford to have a theater teacher. Maybe they have the music teacher or the visual arts teacher. But that's where that partnership comes in. And so there are organizations large and small across our city. In fact, last school year, so the 2023-2024 school year, more than 700 arts and cultural organizations worked with our city schools. And that was to push in and provide direct arts instruction. That was them providing professional development to teachers. That was field trips to arts and cultural institutions. And I think of even just like the work of Peter, he has built this incredible partnership between the National Theater and New York City Public Schools, where those were teachers, regardless if you're a theater teacher or not, teachers now have access to that incredible archive of the National Theater, their recorded works that they are then able to bring into their classroom. So I think it's that sort of creativity and the melding of all these different resources that ultimately is key to this. But yeah, I think we just have to make sure that stays funded though. And that because at the end of the day, of course, I saw a comment earlier in terms of advocating to the principals, which I 100% agree with. But that help the classroom teacher put on plays, no money needed. Well, there is some money needed because that classroom teacher, they need to get paid for their time. And there are usually some resources that go into that. And I know many intrepid teachers that get the donations from Home Depot or able to get the money, say, from Disney Theatrical Group to bring the licensing into their schools. So I think it becomes a creative mix of all of the above. And really, folks, it comes down to then the school leader and the teacher to understand how to navigate and how to find these different pockets of resources and bring them into their school.
Arlene? I see your hand up, Arlene Corsano.
Okay, here I am.
There you go.
Anyway, sorry. I taught for 25 years, and I went to I started teaching the same elementary school that I worked in. And from kindergarten, now this is way back in the 50s, in kindergarten to sixth grade, the teacher had to put on a show. Now, some people, very few wrote their own. When I taught, from fourth grade to eighth, I put on a show every year also. And I wrote my own because I went around how many kids wanted, and some kids wanted to be a tree, but still they were up there. Some kids wanted to dance and sing. I saw who had talent. Most schools, I think, have at least an art teacher to do the scenery. You ask the kids for help. It also helped me get along with two of the toughest kids I had in eighth grade. We needed an old radio for one of it. It was a lip sync show, and somebody needed an old radio, and they had made something up. And I asked the class, and these two kids ran home, got an old radio for one of the house, came back and brought it me, and they were so happy and proud. And Miss Corsano, we got it for you. We got it for you. And from then on, we were like best pals, because I gave them something fun to do. And if a teacher can't write shows, I know most teachers, maybe all of them, would find a place someplace. I don't think there were that much money.
I think this comes back to something we talked about at the very beginning, which is the fact that the arts bring people together. And we talked about the fact that sports and the arts in
But
terms of schools, we're both.
what I'm not hearing is like you need money. But if you have an art teacher and a music teacher, now I did in eighth grades. I had
I'm gonna lose Lucy in 2 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. But anyway, you can do it. I guess maybe I cheated. I used wait till the midnight hour and I didn't pay anybody for it. But you know what? Nobody came after me all those years. So,
I will just say what you say is key is if you have a music teacher, if you have an art teacher, that doesn't necessarily exist across
you
all.
can use records. You can use, I'm sorry, you can use recordings also.
Yeah.
And still not get
Right
in trouble.
now, 290 schools in New York City have no arts teacher. That's about a fifth of schools at this moment.
And kids can draw too. So you don't really need it if you have the desire to do it. What I want to say is don't give up with the classroom teacher.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's though, so often we are made to do like make something out of nothing, which we do. That's what we naturally do in arts education. But what if we put a little investment to that? And we're able then to see it more broadly supporting our students. And I think I was that teacher as well. I devised so much with my students because we didn't have the resources there. But I think that's why we're trying to just level the playing field at the end of the day.
Yeah,
for me, this was particularly interesting. I promised Lucy she could leave, so I'm gonna have to end now, Arlene. But it was particularly interesting to me the fact that Lucy, you come from a background of being a performer, and Kimberly, you come from a background of being a teaching artist, and your perspectives do seem to be somewhat shaped by your backgrounds, and you were a great duet for me today. I enjoyed both of you very, very much. So I want to thank you for both being with us. I leave the room open. If Kimberly, you can stay to meet people and get more questions, that would be great. Lucy, if you have to leave, I understand it. I'm going to basically, at this point, put myself onto my going to remove spotlight from you and spotlight.
I wonder if I get any points because why I have to get off is because I'm walking down the street to see my niece in her year-end dance performance.
Well, that's appropriate. That fits in perfectly well.
There you have it. But thank you for holding space. This is really a really interesting conversation and a really interesting, cross-section of people. So very, very glad to speak with you today, and thank you for inviting me. And I'll let you know how the dance performance goes.
Please do. And you'll probably hear from me again. So, so I'm just going to say a few words to my YouTube audience. First of all, I want to thank my community. I want to thank the people in the room, the people who came here today and were part of the conversation. We're not part of the conversation, but at least we're engaged in listening to the conversation. I want people out there, if you're just discovering us, to know that if you want to be in the room, if you want to be part of the conversation, I welcome that. I would love to have you be part of TRU. You can email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com. I will put you on our Zoom list and you'll be invited back week after week until you tell me to stop. Next week, we have some interesting things lined up. Next week, I have a writer, a playwright friend of ours who has moved from writing stage to writing for screen. And we're going to talk about the differences between the two medium, between the stage and the screen mediums, and how a writer adapts to the different mediums and different expectations depending on where he's writing. 2 weeks from now, I've got 3 theater companies coming, women-led theater companies who came together to form something called the Femme Collective, which they shared resources and produced shows in January. We're going to talk about the experience. We're going to talk about what it's like to be collaborative among theater companies. And I call it co-oping, actually, co-op your resources. And then I have week after week, I have all these things coming up, and I'm booked through the end of August at this point, so I can't tell you all the things that are happening, but I'd love you to reach out and be a part of us and join us. We do this for free. Everybody's welcome to come for free. we also have a ticket price because if you want to pay and support what we do, I will never stop you from doing that. So you can actually buy a $10 ticket or give us a donation. You can join as a TRU member. TRU is an organization that provides all these services for people for $95 a year. It's not an expensive organization, and we'd love to have you come and join us. If you just want to give us a donation, go to TRU Donate, trudonate.com, trudonate.com, and we will be grateful for anything you can do to help us. I guess that's pretty much it, everyone. I hope to see you in the weeks to come. Please come back. We'd love to have you here and love to have you be part of the conversation. And thank you.